Emma Thompson has demanded that Wimbledon is no longer sponsored by Barclays Bank. Wait for it, because they invest in oil. Hello, everyone. This is the Lois and Andre show. Lois, how have you been this week?
I've been very well, actually. I'm still on the wagon. I'm doing all right.
Are you experiencing the global warming that's going on at the moment?
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
It was previously known as summer, but anyway.
Yeah, it's been changed recently, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
And of course, winter's global warming. Oh no, climate change. Sorry.
No, so if the world gets colder or the world gets warmer, then it's to do or stays the same. It's all to do with CO2.
Yeah, and the solution is to be taxed more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, Emma Thompson and a group of celebrities has said that Barclays should no longer sponsor the Wimbledon tennis on the grounds that they support the oil industry. Well, I'm really worried about this, Lois, because what I'm noticing is that there is this constant pressure to get companies to no longer work with oil producers, no longer invest in them, and actually just make it incredibly difficult for them to continue to exist.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, we will constantly and always need oil and gas, even with increased use of renewables. So it doesn't make any sense to not invest. The thing is, if you don't invest in oil and gas exploration, it means you keep the price high. They're still using the same amount, but then the people that have got the existing oil and gas sites can charge more. So all it means is pushing prices up for normal people. But of course, that won't impact on Emma Thompson, which is why she's able, with this group, which includes Richard Curtis and some other people. And I'm a big Blackadder fan, so I don't like saying that. They're able to afford to pay the increased prices. But absolutely everything depends on us having oil and gas, everything, including renewables. Because as I've said to you before, wind turbines are made in China using electricity produced from coal. So
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Emma Thompson really drove me mad because she flew back to a climate protest of first class on BA once. But of course, her attitude is, no, but you have to understand, I'm very important. I need to be able to fly. It's you lot who don't have to fly, who shouldn't be flying anymore.
Absolutely. And this is the same with all of these virtue signaling people. It's not for them, it's for us.
But look, I don't want to compare the oil industry to the tobacco industry, but the tobacco industry was really pretty successfully marginalized by being forced out of being able to sponsor things. Now, there's going to be loads of people who say that's legitimate, and I don't necessarily disagree with that because cigarettes will kill you, although I believe you should have the choice to whether you do it or not. But I just wonder whether oil's next. And my other question, Lois, while you think about that, is this. Is there just an industry who, once they've dealt with smoking, will also want to get rid of alcohol, will want to get rid of oil, will want to get rid of sugar, will want to get rid of salt? And whenever we satisfy their desires, which sounds more interesting than it actually is.
But I wouldn't want to satisfy Emma Thompson's desires, would you?
But whenever we capitulate to what they want, they'll just move on to a more extreme position.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, though, there's an argument with sugar and alcohol and cigarettes. Obviously, there's a libertarian argument that you should be able to do what you want, but they may affect your health in some way. If you do not have oil and gas, your life will be shorter. Since the Industrial Revolution, life expectancy has gone from my age it's doubled to 80 years old. So having an abundant amount of oil and gas and cheap, plentiful energy makes you live longer. And of course, everything that we use is made using oil and gas, including plastics, everything.
Yeah, actually, fun enough, I didn't know that because I always say this, Lois, that part of the purpose of this show is to educate me and hopefully educate you, the viewers, as well, on a lot of this stuff. But of course, what we're talking about here is even if we went all renewables, then all of this stuff that the public can't see, it would all still be made out of oil anyway.
It would be. So it's a nonsensical argument. It's all about restriction and taxing us, and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, none whatsoever. And Emma Thompson will be at Wimbledon. The whole of Wimbledon tournament will be. Every single item there would have been produced using oil and gas. Absolutely everything. The building would have been, everything. It's. Everything she's wearing comes from oil and gas.
But I suppose you look at it. I mean, there is one. I'm sorry for saying this, but I've got to say there is one advantage to the Middle East. At least they're not that bothered about public criticism, are they? So the good news is people like the Qataris will not be put off. They're not going to plunge their country back into poverty. I mean, what people forget is Qatar only has a population of 250,000.
Yeah.
So it's it's not a big place. But of course, they're not going to turn around and get rid of their gas production business, are they?
No, the whole thing is completely disingenuous because we have doubled our capacity, our use of oil and gas in the last 30 years. It will double again.
Yes.
Yeah. So you have to look behind why this is happening, because it's not actually going to happen. We're not going to ever use less oil and gas unless the population is dramatically reduced and our economies are annihilated. Of course, a lot of people think that might be what the purpose is.
Yeah, it's interesting because certainly I don't know whether it's true to say that that these people are actually trying to destroy the economy, but they certainly don't care if that's the results, do they?
They don't care because what they're thinking is that we'll just push it all out to China.
Yes.
That China will produce everything. So it just proves to you that the whole reduced CO2 world emissions thing is a lie, because it's just being pushed to a different country. That's all it is. Yeah.
Okay, you're going to love this one, Lois.
Go on.
Get ready.
Okay.
The House of Commons Climate Change Committee has said that people should stop heating their homes because they risk destroying the environment. I mean, I just find this extraordinary. Clearly, heating your home takes more energy than not heating your home. But it's just such a ludicrous argument to tell people to not be warm.
Not be warm, not be able to wash. I've been reading and listening a lot recently about the whole thing with everyone says they're supportive of protecting the environment and reducing emissions, although a lot of people don't really understand what that necessarily means until it means they can't wash their clothes. They can't have the heating on. They can't afford to drive anywhere. They can't go on their annual holiday. Then people think, oh, hang on a minute,
Yeah, I mean, not being able to wash yourself or your clothes, that wouldn't bother Extinction Rebellion, but we wouldn't like it.
Well, no, we say that, although there's two different parts to them, isn't there? There's the Tarquins and the I was going to say chlamydia. That's not a name, is it?
there will be somebody in Extinction Rebellion called chlamydia.
Martin Jones.
Yeah. Bourbon Buchanan Smythe.
So you've got them, and then obviously you've got the more crusty variants as well. But I mean, this article that we're talking about is basically trying to promote heat pumps, and heat pumps are so ineffectual that I've heard from plumbers that they're taking them out. They're installing them. People are ringing saying, please take them out. They are not adequate. They're not correct for almost all of the housing stock in the UK. You have to have you need to have very thin radiators, which are basically put on walls or underfloor heating.
Yeah.
They don't get very hot either.
No.
So, you have to get used to being colder, and the water doesn't get very hot
No,
either.
well, I don't think ground source heat pumps are a particularly bad thing if you've got the right geographic location.
Absolutely. And it's new builds as well.
New builds. I mean, my younger brother is converting a barn in Cheshire. He's been made a partner at the company. But
good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my meal ticket when this all goes wrong. But obviously he's been able to install from scratch, because it's basically a new build.
Yeah.
These barns always are. But he's able to build the underfloor heating and everything like that. But it's part of a system. What I find incredibly frustrating is I lived in a 2 up, 2 down that we rented briefly in the 1980s when my parents were in between houses. And we weren't homeless, by the way.
In between houses.
The new house was being built slowly, but we were in between houses. But you go to a place like that, and first of all, people don't have the money to spend on all this fancy equipment.
No,
and also, they're just these buildings don't lend themselves to doing it.
They don't, and electricity is going to get more and more expensive, because the more we're trying to use windmills and wind turbines and solar, the more expensive everything will be, including gas. And also having a reliance on one energy source. We've got a perfect energy mix at the moment.
Yeah.
It's perfect. We tried electric cars and all of this kind of jazz 100 years ago, and we abandoned it because it didn't work. We have a perfect mix. Why are we trying to mess it up? Why?
I do find when you talk about electric cars, I always think of those milk floats. But
the fastest milk float in the West.
But the thing that made me laugh about all of that was we were not recycling, but we were reusing, weren't we? Because the problem is, right, I was thinking about this the other day. When you go to your local shop, and they go, right, you can bring your bottles back or whatever. They sell you a bottle of something, then destroy the bottle, melt it down and turn it into a new bottle. You're better with those Bars Iron Brew people where they just wash the bottle and refill it and come round the fizzy pop man.
Absolutely. And the thing is, that we say they melt it down and reuse it, but actually most of the time it's just dumped, even the recycling. I said that to you, didn't I, on your show on Talk TV? The reason why you see all these images of birds and stuff in the sea, animals in the sea, of fish covered in waste, is because it's dumped. We sell our recycling to China and then they dump it in the sea. Yeah,
it was really interesting. I read an obscure World Trade Organization report where China was now refusing to import any more plastic, a particular type of plastic. And the reason was they were not recycling it.
No.
People were just sticking it in a big hole.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what's happening. We're outsourcing all of our naughty behavior to other countries. It's still going on.
Arguably
fast.
Arguably it's worse for the environment, of course, because at least we were responsibly getting rid of it.
Oh, it's not responsibly being got rid of.
No, absolutely not
at all.
Absolutely not. Okay, look, let's have a look at this. I think that this is an absolutely terrifying news story.
God, is that his name?
Volker Turk. Yeah, okay.
Jesus.
The head of the UN Human Rights Commission has said the number one issue affecting the world is climate change. And so he is more bothered about dealing with net zero and climate change than he is about human rights. Now, you know what? What? There's genocide, and his name's Volker Turk. Volker Turk.
That's a bit scary. That's Star Warsy, Star Trek, alien vibe.
But I mean, look, you've got to be passionate about what you do in life, right?
Yeah.
If he is somebody who's the head of the Human Rights Commission of the United Nations, then he should always be talking about human rights. But in fact, he's saying that more important than human rights is the net zero agenda. And I find that very, very worrying.
No, you're absolutely right. But these extreme left globalists that I believe are neo-Marxists, they're the whole net zero fanatics. They don't believe in human rights.
No.
So it's actually quite interesting that the guy that's in charge of human rights has admitted he's not interested in human rights either.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Look, let's just read this to you, what he said. And I find this extraordinary coming from somebody who's supposed to be a responsible adult. Our environment is burning. It's melting. It's flooding. It's depleting. It's dying. It's drying, he said, evoking a dystopian future. That guy sounds like he's been smoking weed.
He does. He also, it's like gaslighting to the nth degree. The truth is, agriculture, we've never had a more abundant time in human history for agriculture. If you look at the statistics for crops and stuff like that internationally, it's never been better. There's always been flooding. There's always been extreme heat, extreme cold. I mean, Richard Tice actually recently made a point that we talk about extreme temperatures in certain countries, but the mainstream media never mention when it's extremely cold in other parts of the world, which is very unusual at the same time.
That's right.
Everything is about the whole restriction, limiting all human activity, and ultimately limiting people. Kids are saying they don't want to have kids now.
Yeah.
So that is the reduction.
I had a very different take than other people when kids were walking around going, "You'll die of old age, I'll die of climate change." I thought that was actually these children being abused by their teachers, being told something that was plainly untrue. But this guy's, I'll read it again. Our environment is burning, it's melting, it's flooding, it's depleting, it's drying, it's dying. It's a dystopian future. But he also said that 80 million people are at risk of hunger by the middle of the next century. Now, this really annoys me because actually it's the way that we are damaging our economy that plunges people into poverty.
Absolutely. If we get rid of people's ability to grow their economies with cheap and reliable energy sources, then that will kill people. It will enable people to not be able to heat their homes, so die of hypothermia. It will, if we won't allow them to use fertilizer, like what happened in Malaysia. People did start starving because crops couldn't be grown. It's the net zero agenda which will plunge people into poverty and starvation. But it's interesting, by the middle of the next century, 80 million. I mean, how have they worked that figure out? How many people, we don't know who's going to be born.
It's like Sadiq Khan and that, what is it, 40,000 Londoners a year die of
4,000.
4,000.
Yeah, it's based on an average hour per year extra life for each Londoner. They don't tell you that.
And of course, what you said, and it was a very sad case of the schoolgirl who did die as a result of pollution, but she was the only person that died that year, and she had a very severe problem with asthma.
Yeah, she's the only person that had died of air pollution on a death certificate over a 10-year period.
Oh, right.
Actually, but she was born with very complicated asthma.
Yeah, I mean, I will.
It's very sad, but she was ill.
I will say one thing that probably should have happened in that case. Rather than say let's shut down London, they probably should have said we will pay for this girl to move to somewhere where it's the countryside or whatever.
Yeah, in the past, and I know this from watching Only Fools and Horses episodes. Yeah, where I get a lot of my information. The GPs used to write a letter, didn't they, to the council, and they'd move them if somebody had a health issue. Yeah, because their granddad, do you remember? They were going to get him a garden flat.
Oh, I don't remember. But listen.
Sorry.
Listen, play it cool, Lois.
No, my understanding is that GPs traditionally would write to the council if someone had a health issue, to say, for example, to get a bungalow or to get out of London for asthma. So you're right, that did happen in the past. Now you don't even know one doesn't even know who their GP is.
No.
So let alone them popping round and writing to the council.
Phone up your GP.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody said to me that what they should do to solve the problem of illegal migrants is put doctors' receptionists on every board.
You know what? Yes, that's very. Actually, though, my receptionists and my doctors are really nice. Thank you so much. I don't want to get on the wrong side of them. I really don't.
My local GPs, they're a big fan of Danielle Nichols.
Oh, are they?
They used to watch her in Mulhern. Anyway, President Xi of China has been warned that he's got to stop ordinary Chinese people believing that climate change is a hoax designed to destroy the economy. Now, now I've got to tell you, Lois, I have some sympathy with the. Look, I don't know whether people genuinely believe that the climate change is as severe as it is, but it is certainly destroying the economy, all of this.
Yeah, it's interesting, actually, because obviously my belief is exactly the same, that it's a hoax that is designed to destroy the economy. But the irony is that in favour of China, because China is the one that's producing everything for us, including the wind turbines, including all of the solar panels. And also they're the ones that have most access to the minerals that are required for phones and electric cars.
Cobalt and things like that.
Yeah, that's right. Even in Africa, what China are doing in Africa at the moment is extraordinary. It makes our colonization look like a Disney Mary Poppins.
I know. And can I just say, this is a show about climate change, but let me tell you, if we had 2.5 million Muslims in concentration camps, people would absolutely hit the roof. We hear this all the time. President Xi of China's quite bad, but not as bad as Donald Trump. What absolute nonsense.
Absolutely. And it does make me think that the whole attacking Israel thing is anti-Semitic, because why is it why is everyone so concerned about the Palestinians? Of course, everyone should be concerned about everybody, but not the Muslims that are in the camps in China. And, so it does have sympathy with that.
But also the other thing about Israel, which I think is really important, is this. If you do not like what President Macron does in France, the solution is not to abolish France, right? Nobody would turn around and go, "Oh, I didn't like that, Margaret Thatcher. Let's abolish Britain."
No,
right? You would never do that.
No.
But here's what I think is the interesting bit about this. What's clear in this argument, and this is a study by the University of Hong Kong. What's very clear is that Chinese people are very, very reticent to destroy their opportunity to become economically powerful and wealthy over this issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, of course, we're sat there going, well, the Chinese don't do any of this. But it's very clear to me now that there is an argument within China, and they have got some extremists themselves.
Yeah. I think that China is the one that's benefiting the most from what they call it, the slow economic suicide of the West.
Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Okay. The government has announced plans to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide produced by peat. Lois, I just want to die, right? Do you know what I think we should do? Okay, let's go through this. There is a new action plan to reduce peat carbon emissions, improve resilience to drought, and support farmers following recommendations from the chair of the Lowland Agricultural Peat Task Force. Now, let me tell you, if you are a member of the Lowland Agricultural Peat Task Force, you need to die, right? That is got to be one of the worst jobs in Britain.
Well, this buys in again to the things that have been called conspiracy theories in the past about how they want to force people from the countryside into cities. Because, like, for example, you'll know know this better than I, but in rural Ireland, people have been burning peat to keep their homes warm for centuries.
Absolutely.
And a lot of these houses that they don't necessarily have gas and stuff like that. So again, we're forcing people out of the countryside.
I come from the Lancashire coalfield, so I don't know if you know this, but peat is coal. It just hasn't been.
Yeah, that's right.
It just hasn't been compressed for long enough. But now look, the government's spending 7.5 million trying to reduce the amount of emissions from peat, which I find absolutely staggering. and there's going to be 5 million put aside for schemes for apparently paleoculture exploration fund.
Yeah, okay. I wonder if the director of the say it again, Paliculture Exploration Fund. I wonder if he goes on nice holidays and what do they call those research trips? What do they call people go?
Fact finding.
It
reminds me of that great episode of
in
Phoenix Nights.
Amsterdam.
It reminds me of that great episode of Phoenix Nights. You ever kissed a girl, son? Okay. TikTok is under attack for spreading information that climate change might not be as honest and true as perhaps it's made out by Greta Thunberg.
Oh, no.
Now, the social media platform, I have to say, is relatively controversial, Lois, but it does appear to be a bastion of free speech. And by the way, I just want to be very clear. When we're talking about this climate change denial and all this conspiracy theories, it's not that bad. All they're saying is, let's not just shut down our country immediately and permanently over CO2.
Well, we've talked before about the use of the word denial as well, which a lot of people find extremely offensive in this context. Obviously, it's the main use of the word is Holocaust denial. So there's just a way of shutting down an argument, isn't it? But climate change denial. What, people having an opinion or asking a question? How dare you? How dare you?
How dare you? You've ruined my childhood. Get to school, love. I mean, what people forget about her is she's somebody who suffered from a mental illness that meant that if planes flew above her school, she didn't feel able to go into the school. That's why she wasn't there. It wasn't a protest. She's just a nutter.
But her family are also multi-millionaire communists, which I find quite interesting.
What's interesting about her, and we've discussed this before, Lois, her family are people who, how do I say this politely, have leaned into a mental illness. So instead
she's got learning difficulties. She's autistic, isn't she? Yeah.
So if my daughter, I've got a daughter, but if I did have a daughter and she said to me,
I'll give you a daughter.
Okay. I'm unwilling to congratulations, you can still do it.
I have the womb of a teenager. Right, carry on.
How old are you on average?
Shut up. Right, carry on.
but if it was my daughter and she turned around and she said, look, I'm not able to go to school because I'm so paranoid when planes fly above, I would get a psychiatric help. And I wouldn't really ridicule her for it, right? But instead what that family did was they said, no, you are completely normal.
Yeah.
This is a completely sensible thing to do.
Yeah.
What we're going to do is we're going to make you a celebrity out of it. Now, once again, when young people believe that they're going to die of climate change, what we need to do is say, first and most important thing, you aren't.
Yes,
Now,
you are not going to die from climate change. Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than saying what we're going to do is let's change the whole world, because what it is in Lois is it's my truth. That's the problem. By the way, I just felt your breath.
Yeah, no, you did.
But it's my it's this concept.
This bit isn't old then.
I'm not sure whether you're over the age of consent, but there are bits of you that are, bits of you that are.
He's dead. He's actually dead later.
But
carry on talking. Come on, keep digging.
but it's that whole concept of my truth, right? There's the truth, and then there's not the truth, but this my truth. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to decide to destroy the economy. We're going to shut down all the schools. We're going to tell children that they're going to die of climate change in the next 5 or 10 years, because it's hard. It's easier to do that than to say to Greta Thunberg, "I'm sorry, you need mental health treatment."
Yeah, well, she's been used and abused. There's no other way to get it, But but she's like the Saint Greta, isn't she? In the 16th century, they had these nuns that had visions and all of that, and they were used as prophecies and things. This buys into the whole narrative of it being a religious cult, and you can't question religious cults because then.
No, I think if you look at, and I don't want to, I don't want to go too far with this, but if you look at the most recent religious extremists that we've seen, the Islamic State, obviously the climate change lot are not similar to them. They're not genocidal, right? So I would never say that. But when it comes to, the absolute belief that they're right, the absolute determination. I mean, I saw a lady who was a former Islamic State member. And they said, well, why did you behead homosexuals? He said, yeah, but that's in the Quran, right? You're allowed to do it.
Yeah.
But the view was, I'm right. You have to accept that. But I've noticed that with climate change. Similarly, there is a priestly class that you can't challenge.
Yeah.
And then there's this idea, almost like an Spanish Inquisition, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And again, talking about your show on Talk TV, I don't know if you remember, but you had that solicitor, that lawyer, who said that they weren't going to represent any companies to do with oil and gas anymore. And she said that she admitted that if somebody died in an ambulance because Just Stop Oil blocked the road, that it was sort of okay because we're saving the world.
Yeah.
So there's a moral justification that's terrifying about these people because they believe they're right.
I mean, that's the real worry. It's why these authoritarian regimes always end up with concentration camps.
Yeah.
Because what happens is the leaders of them are so convinced that what they're doing is virtuous and right that they go, look, the problem is that these people are evil.
Yes.
Right? And okay, I don't necessarily want to round them up, but rounding up evil people in order to ensure
for the greater good.
That's what they convince themselves, absolutely convince themselves of it. Now, okay, this is something that we've discussed previously, but I think it's really interesting. The CEO of a major UN climate change summit is actually the head of an oil company. Now, Lois, I don't think it necessarily matters that who this person is, but actually it's a guy from the United Arab Emirates. He is called Sultan Al Jaber. He's the chief executive of the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. Now he's running an event on climate change. Now you and I have talked about this before. You say that the climate change agenda is brilliant for oil companies. Why?
Because if you restrict new oil and gas exploration, you keep the prices constantly high of people that already hold oil and gas contracts and hold oil and gas sites. You keep the price up. So I mean, and also a lot of these companies, they have renewables as part of what they're doing as well, and they take a lot of government subsidies. So I believe to a certain extent they're in on it. I mean, Just Stop Oil is funded. I know that they say she's not actively involved anymore, but it's funded by Getty oil money.
Yes.
So, she will directly benefit, whether it's through past investments or current ones that they've hidden, from there being no new oil and gas exploration. We are not going to use less oil and gas ever.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And of course, even if, I mean, we don't know the investment portfolio of the Getty family,
no.
but it is worth pointing out that, this is a family who have made billions from oil, to then turn around and say, well, now I'm very rich, you can't benefit from it either. And I find it particularly disgusting because we're talking to people in the developing world and saying, we're sat around in this fabulous building that we're in now. And by the way, thank you to the Just Stop Oil people who worked out where we filmed this and attempted to attack it last week. But don't worry, we're relatively safe up here. But we're able to sit around in this fabulous building because we've benefited from cheap energy. To turn around to someone in Nigeria and say that they can't do that, I just think is really offensive.
It's about keeping the poor and making people that aren't currently poor. The only way that we can reduce the use of oil and gas is to reduce the number of people on the planet. Okay, so unless they're going to actively do that by making people freeze to death in their homes and not be able to use fertilizer for food and stuff like that, then it's, as I said, it's completely disingenuous to say that we're not going to be using the same amount of energy. It will go up. It will keep going up, which it has been.
Now, as we're talking about this issue, why don't we talk about the issue that has been rumbling on COP28? And it's this idea of delegates coming from the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I think I see big producers like BP. They have a renewables division. They have an oil and gas division, right? So it's all the same people. But my instinct is that I'm suspicious of the oil and gas people being there, but I'd rather them be there than not there, because at least then there can be some sort of plurality of opinion.
Well, yeah, and also I'm as afeared, if not more afeared, because it's fake, of big green. I think that people who are benefiting directly from law changes to do with electric vehicles, heat pumps, wind farms, they should be labelled very clearly that we are benefiting from the net zero racket.
Yes.
As long everyone should be clearly marked who they are and and how they're benefiting.
Yeah, so that's just, I mean, for those who didn't watch last week's show, what we were talking about last week was that they want at COP28 to have people clearly displaying their background. Now, of course, what was interesting was they were interested. Sorry,
I can't be that haggard and disgusting, can I?
No, she's hotter in real life. Believe me. I'll tell you what.
It's just my reproductive system is a bit ancient, according to you.
No, I only ridicule people for being ugly who are hot.
That's all right. Then.
But no, I'll tell you what. When we went into the pub the other week, and there was a fella there, his little face lit up when he saw you.
Where?
We went into the pub a couple of weeks ago, and you didn't drink. Actually, we had some fantastic chicken wings.
And we did. They were the best chicken wings. So we digress. No, don't you want to have Don't you want to eat bugs?
Oh, God. Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because now they've approved that we can have bug protein in our food.
And it won't be marked. So it will just say protein powder. So what will happen is that vegans and vegetarians will unwittingly be eating insects and grubs and all of that.
I've got a friend of mine who says that oysters are vegan.
Why?
And he said the reason is because an oyster neither has a brain nor a nervous system. It doesn't know it's alive. It doesn't. Is it
the only thing? One of the only things that doesn't know.
I think that's probably right. It can't be injured. Well, it can be injured, but it can't feel pain. It's not got a nervous system.
It's not sentient. What's the word?
Sentient.
Sentient. Yeah, that's the one.
Do you know, I went to Borough Market the other week, and there was this bloke from Barrow-in-Furness who literally offered me an oyster with caviar on top.
Oh, how lovely!
It was a mere £11.
Per oyster.
Per oyster.
Yeah.
But so I had one.
I think I'll get a guy to take me there. Yeah. And that's not coming out of my. Actually, there are cobwebs on my purse because I try not to.
The Viz said in one of its money-saving tips, it said a cigar tube with an angry wasp inside will make an inexpensive vibrator. But they also said. What if the
link came up? Oh no!
Recreate all the fun of eating oysters. Drink seawater from an ashtray.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Oh no.
Climate change extremists have warned Morocco that its centuries-old immigration system is under threat from climate change. Now, apparently, the reason that the immigration system is under threat is not because it's been poorly maintained. No. It's because of climate change.
No, it'll be absolutely nothing to do with the government agency or the private company that's maintaining it. It will be 100% to do with climate change.
Yeah.
What a
absolutely. I mean, they just always seem to blame for everything. I just, in a sense, sometimes we get fatigue from all of this, don't we?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm assuming that you don't want to talk about Morocco for very long.
I don't know what to say. It's so silly, isn't it?
Absolutely. But I'll tell you where it is serious. It's serious when what happens is public authorities, rather than maintaining things like river dredging, rather than looking at, they just, I mean, I'll tell you, Datchet and Colnbrook, near where I live, always flood now. The Rayner family, who owned the local farm, had been dredging that bloody river for 200 years. The Environment Agency banned them doing it 10 years ago, and it now regularly floods thanks to climate change.
Yeah. Then they can blame that on climate change. It's like if you don't build reservoirs when their population increases, then they say, "Oh, it's so hot, there's no water in the reservoirs." No.
And they turned round to Rayner, and basically, he's a good bloke actually, Colin Rayner. Some people might know him because he's quite big in the National Farmers Union, but. They sat around with him and they said, well, you're just going to have to accept now that there'll be more flooding thanks to climate change. He goes, I used to dredge the river. My father dredged the river. Yeah. My grandfather dredged. We've been dredging the river for 200 years. And suddenly now it's flooding. But he said it's just an absolute nightmare.
Yeah. And it's a Brilliant excuse, isn't it? It's a brilliant excuse.
The House of Commons Climate Change Committee has demanded that we move even faster on net zero and has accused the government of a lack of leadership. I have to say, Lois, I saw Theresa May on the TV the other day saying that her proudest achievement was forcing net zero through by, 2050. I think it's caused real poverty in this country.
It has,
now,
and it will.
Now, I've got to be honest with you. Theresa May, I understand why she's worried. She regularly goes walking in Switzerland and she reckons that she's seen a reduction in the glaciers. I don't know. I've not been there. But I could, I think that she is one of the more sensible people. But what she doesn't understand is that not everybody has a husband who earns £700,000 a year.
No, absolutely right. And, in terms of the ice increasing, there are parts of the world where there's been a decrease and parts where there's been an increase. This is what happens. The world changes. We used to be, I know this will upset you, and you obviously, we used to be connected to Europe, before the blessed channel. Because things change.
The place was called Doggerland.
Doggerland.
It was called Doggerland.
That's right, Doggerland.
Doggerland.
So that's not in the north of England in some dodgy car park somewhere.
Well, it is, yeah.
It's also but Theresa May. Sorry, just quickly on the Theresa May point. She's a Tory who's celebrating bringing in communism, because effectively, whether it's what's in the intention or not, that's what will have to happen if net zero policies are implemented. Because there'll be no industry, there'll be no capitalism.
But look, we slag off the Conservative Party quite a lot, and I think rightly so.
At the moment.
But some of them are quite sensible. But the one thing that all enthralled with is this net zero. We go on about Boris Johnson being fantastic, and because he was supportive on Brexit, I think he was fantastic.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, the minute something was green, he was bloody obsessed with it, wasn't he?
It's very, very, very strange. And I think the thing is, they have these meetings every year, Davos and all of that, and all of the world leaders go, and you've got the people. It's all about net zero,
yes.
And it's all about everybody working together, and there being basically one policy for us, for Europe, for America, for everything, and everyone adhering to exactly the same strategies. And it must be intoxicating if you're prime minister and you go to one of these events, and there's all these big boys, and there's captains of industry,
yes.
Global companies, media companies, social media companies, and they're saying, right, this is what needs to happen. You're like, yes, sir, no, sir.
But I had a friend of mine who had a theory about COVID deaths. This becomes relevant in a second. But what he said that a lot of people were over-reporting the number of COVID deaths in hospitals. And the reason they were doing it was because, if one hospital had, say, 300 COVID deaths, and then the hospital down the road had 2, they'd go, we must be getting this wrong. Yes. And so it was constantly. Now, look, at the end of the day, I have no doubt that, as an example, people tested positive for COVID and then died. But I mean, I saw an example of somebody who had liver cancer. He went into the hospital for his last days of life, tested positive for coronavirus, and they said he's a COVID.
Well, at one point, you could be decapitated in the car accident. They would have put COVID on your death certificate.
Funnily enough, I said this on BBC Northern Ireland. I said, look, if you tested positive for coronavirus and would run over 28 days later, you would be counted as a coronavirus death. Yeah. And that was actually true. But I mean, I think it's a real worry, isn't it, about the way that they're doing this. Now, apparently, the Business and Trade Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, says that a long-term plan to protect a long-term plan for the automotive industry is now coming next month. Well, that long-term plan is to say we're shutting it down.
It is, and there was a parliamentary select committee that I saw some footage of recently, where they were talking, civil servants were talking about the transition of away from us producing cars, and how that we've managed in the sector, how the sector stuff would be managed. I mean, all of the electric cars, a vast majority are going to be produced in other countries, but it's very interesting. There is a massive backlash. VW, for example, I believe, have stopped producing electric cars now. They've got hardly any resale value. I was talking to somebody on GB News the other day who's a car dealer, and he said, if you're going to sell an electric car, you have to second hand. He said, number one, no one wants them, but to get rid of them, you have to knock at least $7,000 off the guide price, because nobody wants them.
And is that because of the maintenance issues?
It's because of the maintenance issues. It's because they depreciate. They don't hold their value. It's because of the charging situation. Also, a lot of people are getting much more wise as to how unethical and how ungreen they are. And and they're just.
I mean,
rubbish.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what I don't have a problem with. So there's a couple of advantages of electric cars. Number one, the emissions for producing the energy is somewhere else. So it's not coming out of the car's exhaust, right? It's coming out of a power station somewhere, but that could be out of
but
town.
with modern petrol and diesel cars, very modern ones, that the emissions, CO2 obviously is there, but I don't believe that's a problem anyway. But in terms of dangerous emissions, that there's virtually none.
What with catalytic converters and things like that.
So
The other slight advantage of electric cars that I've been in, they do tend to accelerate really, really fast.
Oh, do they?
Oh, they're really good. Yeah, because there's no lag. It just goes direct.
Working class people and middle class people will just not be able to afford these cars.
But they're happy with that, aren't they?
Oh yeah. Well, they don't want the hoi polloi. The peasants are revolting. They don't want us out and about.
The French are revolting. They're having a revolution as well. Hey, by the way, I did read a report this week that the French riots that have taken place are as a result of climate change. The argument goes, it's utterly ludicrous. The argument goes that because of the hot weather this summer, people are extremely angry. And had there not been hot weather as a result of climate change, people wouldn't be in a bad mood and wouldn't start rioting. Right, now look.
So the French Revolution, it was very hot then, was it?
I mean, it's just...
I know.
But it's sort of, well, if we fix climate change, we'll stop the problems that are happening in France. No, what they've got in France, and I will say this seriously, France has brought a huge number of people to the country with absolutely no thought about what to do with them. No. And it is a very racist country.
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily know whether I agree with that or not. I haven't experienced, I haven't seen it for myself, but I think, they're probably not as tolerant as us. No.
France has been culturally enriched.
Yeah. Well, they obviously, they're not happy with their culture being changed. In that they're very proud people, the French, aren't they? But
look, all these unlimited immigration is a problem. But it's remarkable that, of course, unlimited immigration has caused the racial tensions in France. I mean, it's the same as Sadiq Khan. Oh, let's just bring them all over. Well, what about housing? Oh, who cares?
Yeah, no,
oh, what job? Oh, who cares about the jobs? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And then it all ends badly. And we've just seen an example of that.
Yeah, because young men as well, the people that are coming over to this country, and I'm sure it's the same in the rest of Europe at the moment, are all young men, Yeah. And why would they be, if they were fleeing a war zone, then surely, young men wouldn't flee a war zone. It'd be just women and children.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine all those my streets being invaded? I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's leave the women and children. And all the men are going to leave.
Yeah,
the problem is we're having a conversation about a lot of this stuff in a way that we know is false. We do not believe that Albanians are coming over to the United Kingdom because they believe that they're in danger in their country.
No, they just get on a plane?
Well, they could if they were legitimate.
That's what I mean. So that that proves economic migration.
So you asked the question, why would you border jump? And the answer is because you're not qualified to come to the UK.
Yes.
No skill or criminal conviction.
Yeah, because they're having to pay to come on the boat. So could just buy surely it'd be an easier
30
journey.
quid.
Yeah.
30 quid on Ryanair.
Yeah.
Okay, Keir Starmer has distanced himself from Dale Vince, who has donated £1.5 million to Labour Party, but has also compared people who deny climate change or skeptics of climate change to Holocaust deniers. Now, 6 or 7 million people were murdered, principally being gassed to death, herded naked into a filthy dungeon, and then exposed to toxic gas for 15 to 20 minutes to kill them. Yeah, the idea that you questioning whether we should be going down this net zero route is the same as denying that these people were treated in this way is disgusting. And
even the use of the word, anyone who uses the word deniers, though, is almost going down the same path as Dale Vince, I believe.
Yeah, but it's the whole idea that they're always trying to compare you to Hitler. They're always saying you're like Hitler, Ken Livingstone, concentration camp guard. I mean Hitler. But it is a serious problem that these people now are so zealous that they would think it was appropriate to compare what you do, which, by the way, I don't think is even skepticism. I think you've just got an open mind. But to compare you to somebody who denied that 6 million or 7 million people were gassed by Nazi Germany is just ludicrous.
It is, and as I say, it needs to be removed from our colloquial language. The whole phrase climate denier.
But what they also do is they believe that they're so right that they have a right to do this.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting though, because he actually has been criticised recently for having like free Palestine flags and all of that at his football ground that he owns. And one of his principal sponsors, a Jewish family-owned business, they withdrew their sponsorship.
The interesting thing about him is he's just a taxpayer-funded fatty, isn't he?
Yeah.
He hasn't got a business. What he's got is public subsidies.
It's always been the same with him. Every single penny, the amount of subsidies that he's had is unbelievable. And he donated money to the Labour Party, and then Ed Miliband brought in the Climate Change Act, which he directly benefited from his subsidies, then donated the money back to the Labour Party. I mean, he was even given half the money towards his £500,000 as a grant, his £500,000 electric supercar. We gave him that. Does that make you feel good when you do your tax return?
And there are people who watch all of my shows, because I'm really, really proud that we make television for ordinary people. You know, you don't have to have a degree in science in order to understand what Lois is talking about. Though it's helpful. It's helpful. But we will have people watching this show who cannot afford to heat their house, and they will be seeing the bills go up, and they'll be seeing migrants in the local hotel, and they'll be seeing Dale Vince with a £500,000 supercar belittling them that we're paying for. Yeah. And they'll say, well, you know, what on earth? Why did, and I know it sounds twee, why did my grandfather run into machine gun fire in Normandy for this shambles?